The boardroom was silent. The kind of silence that didn't just fill a room, it pierced through it. Reporters clutched their notepads. Executives sat frozen, cameras rolled, and in the center of it all, beneath the sterile glare of the fluorescent lights, stood her, Emily Saunders, 22. Shaking, but standing tall. Behind her, a screen displayed the headline that changed everything. 22-year-old intern claims baby belongs to 63-year-old CEO who's sterile after an accident. And right across from her, stone-faced, sat Richard Langford, a titan of Wall Street. A man who'd built a $4.2 billion empire from scratch. A man who once survived a car crash so brutal, doctors said he'd never walk properly again and never have children. And now, he was staring at the one thing he never accounted for. A child. His child. But this wasn't where it began. No. To understand why everything collapsed, you have to go back to the beginning. To the night no one was supposed to remember. Pay close attention. There's a brief quiz at the end asking, how many times was Richard Langford's name mentioned? It's just for fun. Get it right within 7 days for a chance at our shoutout post. Watching late? Answer anyway. We might still surprise you. Drop a comment, hit like, subscribe now, and turn on the bell for more real-life inspired dramas and emotional transformations. Only here on Fiction Echoes. Emily Saunders was nobody. At least that's how it felt. Fresh out of college, nervous, hopeful, just one of a dozen unpaid interns rotating through Langford Global's glossy Midtown Manhattan headquarters. But beneath her smile was someone desperate for a breakthrough. In her career, in her life, in anything. She needed to matter, to be seen, and then came him. Richard Langford. 63. Regal, towering, intimidating. He walked with a slight limp. A souvenir from the accident they all whispered about but never asked him to explain. He never noticed the interns, until one late night changed everything. The gala was over. Most had gone home, the champagne was flat, the band had packed up, but Emily was still there, tucked behind a curtain, organizing name cards and flower invoices, trying to prove she belonged. "Why are you still here?" The voice startled her. She turned, and there he was. Richard Langford, half smiling, half tired, holding a glass of untouched scotch. "I didn't think anyone noticed interns," she muttered. "I notice everything," he said. She laughed nervously. He didn't. Instead, he stepped closer, studying her. Not in the predatory way tabloids love to twist, but with the odd curiosity of a man who hadn't had a real conversation with someone under 40 in years. And then, conversation happened. Not business, not HR, just life. She told him about her mom working 2 jobs. He told her about the accident, how his car hit black ice on the way to a charity board meeting, how he woke up to a priest whispering last rites, how the doctors saved him, but took away his future family with one irreversible surgery. A clean break, he'd called it. No heirs, no distractions, just legacy. But something in her eyes made him feel not dead. Not for long. They didn't mean to kiss. They didn't mean to go upstairs, and they certainly didn't mean for that night to mean anything. But it did. Emily didn't speak about that night. Not to her roommate, not to HR, not even to herself. She carried it like a ghost, one that showed up in her silence, in the way she flinched when Richard Langford's name was mentioned in morning briefings. For his part, Richard acted as if nothing had happened. No awkward glances, no favors, no threats, just a quiet, suffocating distance. He had rules, and what happened that night would remain a mistake. 3 weeks later, Emily fainted in the company kitchen. "Probably stress," the receptionist said. "You interns work like oxen." But deep down, Emily already knew. She felt it. The aching fatigue, the dizzy spells, the change. One trip to the urgent care clinic later confirmed it. She was pregnant. She sat in her tiny studio apartment, lights off, test still clutched in her hand like it could somehow unpee itself. Emily Saunders, 22 years old. No savings, no partner, no plan. Pregnant, with the child of a billionaire who once told her his legacy was everything, and that he had no interest in creating one. She could have left. She could have disappeared, but she didn't. Instead, she wrote an email. Subject, private meeting request. No details, no emotion. Just a time and a floor. Their executive wing, Friday 4 p.m. Richard Langford read the message and stared at it for a long time. He wasn't stupid. He'd been here before, or so he thought. But something about the sender's name made his jaw clench. He responded with one word, confirmed. Friday, 4 p.m. The blinds were down, the mahogany desk was spotless, and Emily stood there holding nothing but truth. "I'm pregnant." The words landed with the weight of a gavel, but Richard didn't flinch. Not immediately. He simply leaned back, pressed his fingertips together, and said, "That's not possible." Emily blinked. "Excuse me? I had a vasectomy years ago, after my accident. The surgery was irreversible." She stepped forward. "Well, then either I'm lying or mistaken," he cut in sharply. "Which one do you think it is?" Emily's breath hitched. "It's yours." He stood up, towering over her, not angry, just stunned. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You have no idea what this could do to me." "Maybe you should have thought of that before." His hand slammed the desk. "Enough." Silence again. That cruel corporate silence. He exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I'm offering you a private settlement. You disappear, quietly, and this never happened." Her face went cold. "I'm not going to disappear. This isn't some tabloid scandal I'm trying to sell. I'm keeping the baby." Then she turned and left. The next week, an anonymous tip hit the inbox of the Post. 22-year-old intern claims baby belongs to 63-year-old CEO who's sterile after an accident. They ran with it. Because of course they did. Within 48 hours, Langford Global stock plummeted 14%. Investors demanded answers. Board members panicked. Richard Langford was asked, then forced to resign to avoid reputational damage. Everything he'd built, every handshake, every merger, gone in a headline. And still, Emily hadn't said a word to the press. She stayed silent. But the world wasn't. Now the question burned through every news cycle. Was she lying? Or was the mighty Richard Langford not as sterile as he claimed? He refused to take the test. He claimed the accusation was a stunt, a cruel, opportunistic fabrication. He called her unstable. His lawyers sent letters, cease and desist. They even hinted at countersuits. And still, she said nothing, until the baby was born. The child was born on a rainy Thursday morning. No photographers, no news crews, just Emily, alone in a hospital room, staring into the eyes of a baby boy who looked nothing like her, but everything like him. The same sharp jawline, the same gray eyes, the same shadow of a dimple on the left cheek when he stretched. She didn't cry. She'd done enough of that. But she did whisper one name over and over into the newborn's tiny ear. "You're not a scandal. You're not a mistake." She named him Daniel, and for a moment, just one, the world outside didn't matter. But outside, it did. Within hours, photos leaked. Not from Emily, she had no public profile, but someone at the hospital, a nurse, maybe, or a distant relative, had snapped a shot. The child's face, and the resemblance was undeniable. The blogs went wild. Reddit threads compared baby Daniel's face to Richard Langford's college yearbook photos. The hashtags trended overnight. Langford legacy, not so sterile, baby billionaire. Then came the panel shows. Some experts defended Emily. Others called her a fame seeker. But the pressure, the relentless spotlight, finally cracked something inside the former CEO. He issued a statement. "There is no possibility, biologically or otherwise, that the child in question could be mine." It was cold, clean, corporate. But then came the subpoena. Emily's attorney, a quiet, unshakable woman named Paula Greaves, filed for a court-ordered paternity test. And this time, Richard couldn't say no. 2 weeks later, in a clinic lined with beige wallpaper and bad lighting, Richard Langford sat in silence as a nurse swabbed the inside of his cheek. He said nothing to Emily. He didn't even look at her. He just stared straight ahead, hands folded in his lap, like a man waiting for his final judgment. Emily didn't speak either. But in her arms, Daniel cooed, unaware he'd just shaken the life of the man who swore he couldn't exist. It took 11 days. When the envelope arrived, Richard didn't open it in the car. He waited until he got home, sat in his leather chair, the one by the fireplace, with the accident scars in his hip still aching from the cold. He opened the envelope slowly, like it might explode. Probability of paternity, 99.996%. He blinked. Once, twice, then nothing. No rage, no denial, just silence. For the first time in decades, he felt small. The next morning, headlines screamed louder than ever. Langford lied. DNA proves baby is his. Board members distanced themselves. Former allies deleted photos. Old friends ghosted him. His ex-wife, who had helped spread the sterile after accident story, issued a public apology and quietly disappeared to the Bahamas. And Richard Langford? He vanished. Not physically, just from the world that once praised him. No more speaking gigs, no interviews, no quarterly statements. He retreated to a townhouse in upstate New York and didn't speak to a soul for 3 months, until he saw a video. It had gone viral. Daniel, now 3 months old, giggling in a baby bouncer, and Emily, exhausted but radiant, whispering, "You are so loved." Played it again, and again, and again. Then he picked up the phone. The voicemail was short. "Emily, it's Richard. I'd like to see you, both of you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want 5 minutes, please." It came from an unknown number. No caller ID, no follow-up, just that one message. Emily didn't call back, not for days. She let it sit like a question she didn't want to answer, because part of her still hated him, for denying her, for trying to erase her, for making her carry the weight of public shame alone. But another part, the quieter, gentler part, remembered something else. The man in the ballroom, the one who held her gaze when no one else did. She forwarded the voicemail to Paula, her lawyer, with one sentence, "Should I?" The reply came instantly. "That's not a legal question, that's a mother's." So she said yes. They met in a small cafe 2 hours outside the city. No cameras, no press. Just two people who had once shared a night and now shared a bloodline. Richard was thinner than she remembered. Hair grayer, posture weaker, but his eyes, those storm gray eyes, still burned. He stood when she walked in, looked at her, then at the baby carrier she clutched like armor. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to Daniel. She didn't move. "Why?" she said. Her voice didn't crack, but her hands did, trembling just slightly. "I wanted it to be impossible," Richard said softly. "I needed it to be, because if it wasn't, then everything I said, everything I did." He stopped. Tears welled, not in Emily's eyes, but in his. "I ruined you," he whispered. "And didn't interrupt." Emily didn't interrupt. "After the accident, I didn't just lose the ability to have children. I lost the courage to want one. I told myself I was sterile because it was easier than being vulnerable again." Silence. Then she asked, "Do you want to be in his life?" He looked up slowly. "I don't deserve to be." "That's not what I asked." He didn't answer with words. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. Something worn. A tiny silver rattle. It had initials engraved, RL. "My mother gave it to me when I was born," he said. "I never gave it to anyone. I want him to have it." Emily stared at it. Not because it was expensive, but because it was real. She left the cafe without a promise, no custody agreements, no photo ops, just that small rattle in her diaper bag, and a story that would never be written in the press. Weeks passed, then months. One morning, a package arrived at Emily's apartment. Inside, a trust document, no strings attached, a college fund, a housing stipend, and a note in Richard's handwriting. "Legacy doesn't start with empires, it starts with second chances. I hope someday he'll let me earn mine." She didn't cry, but she did smile. And that night, as she rocked Daniel to sleep, she whispered, "You changed the world, little one, before you even knew it." The years passed quietly. Emily moved out of her studio and into a modest home just outside Westchester. Nothing extravagant, just enough space for Daniel to grow. A backyard, a swing, a bookshelf that got fuller every birthday. She never married. Not because she didn't want to, but because no one ever felt like enough. Daniel filled the space in her life that once felt like survival. He gave her purpose. And then there was Richard Langford. He kept his distance. At first, holiday cards, occasional wire transfers labeled MISC, family gift, but never a knock at the door. Until Daniel turned 5. It was a school fundraiser, the kind where glitter glue and cheap wine mix awkwardly. Emily had just finished hanging up finger paintings when a shadow fell over her. She turned and froze. He hadn't changed much. Still tall, still composed, still walking with that faint limp that made him seem more human than legend. But this time, he looked nervous. "Did you come to write another check?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I came to ask if I could meet him, really meet him." Emily studied his face. Not the billionaire, not the mistake, just a man, trying. She nodded once. "You have 5 minutes." Daniel didn't know who he was at first. He just looked up from his crayon drawing and smiled. "You look like me," the boy said. Richard knelt slowly, cautiously. "I've been told that," he said, voice cracking. Emily stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, heart racing. She watched as the man who once denied his son leaned in to ask about dinosaurs and snack preferences. And for the first time, it wasn't awkward. It was soft, earnest, real. When the 5 minutes passed, Emily walked over. "He talks about you," Richard said quietly, even though he doesn't know why. She didn't reply. He handed her a sealed envelope, just something for when you're ready. Then he left. Emily waited 2 days before opening it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, crisp, smudged in places like it had been rewritten again and again. Emily, I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that, but every time I see his face, even in pictures, I feel something I didn't believe I was capable of. Not guilt, not regret, hope. I'd like to establish something more permanent, not for me, for him. A foundation. Something that ensures he never feels like an accident. I'm not asking to be part of your life. I'm asking if I can be part of his. But I'll respect your answer. Always, Richard. She read it twice, then 3 more times. Then she folded it, put it back in the envelope, and slid it into the drawer with Daniel's birth certificate and hospital bracelet. That Sunday, she called a number she hadn't saved, but never forgot. You said you wanted to be part of his life, she said. You'll start with weekends, no staff, no press, just pancakes and cartoons. The silence on the other end was short, but it spoke volumes. Understood, Richard said. Thank you. And for the first time in 6 years, the line went quiet. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because, finally, they didn't have to. The auditorium buzzed with quiet excitement. Proud parents clutched phones, teachers shuffled last-minute programs, and in the front row, flanked by empty chairs Emily had deliberately left open, sat Richard Langford in a navy blazer and charcoal tie, his hair now nearly white, hands folded in his lap. He'd been at every milestone since that first pancake weekend. Little league games, parent-teacher conferences, science fairs where Daniel, now 17, won second place for a solar-powered irrigation prototype. Richard never demanded attention. He never signed autographs. He never once asked to be called Dad. But he came, and in time, Daniel stopped asking why. He just called him Rich. The announcer's voice crackled over the speakers. Valedictorian Daniel Saunders, please come to the stage. Applause erupted. Emily smiled, and Richard clutched the edges of his chair like it was holding him up. Daniel walked to the podium, tall, confident, his mother's fire, his grandfather's calm. He looked out at the crowd. People think legacies come from blood, from last names, from billion-dollar buildings with your picture in the lobby. But that's not what I learned. I learned that sometimes a legacy comes from showing up, even when you're not sure you're wanted, from taking responsibility, from listening, and from choosing to love someone you weren't supposed to. The crowd was silent. Emily's throat tightened, and Richard bowed his head. To the man who didn't have to be in my life, but chose to be anyway, thank you. Then he walked off stage and didn't look back. That night, at the small celebration in Emily's backyard under string lights and paper lanterns, Daniel found a small box tucked beneath his chair. Inside, a folded deed to a scholarship fund, not in Daniel's name, but in Emily's. The Emily Saunders Foundation for girls who dare to speak the truth. No cameras, no announcement, just a note tucked inside, with Richard's handwriting. You were never a mistake. You were the moment I stopped running. Daniel looked up at Emily holding the note. She didn't cry, but her hand reached for his, and for a long moment they just sat there. Months later, Richard Langford passed quietly in his sleep. No press release, no funeral photos, just a sealed envelope left behind with instructions. Inside, a photo of a newborn named Daniel, asleep in a hospital blanket. And on the back, in Richard's fading handwriting, legacy isn't what you build. It's who you show up for. That photo now hangs in Emily's hallway, not in a frame of gold, but of driftwood Daniel carved in college. And when people ask who the man in the photo is, she smiles softly. That's Daniel's grandfather, the one the world almost never knew, because he believed a lie. Sometimes the biggest stories aren't the ones that make the headlines. They're the ones that unfold quietly, in hospital rooms, in voicemail messages, in backyard graduations. This story could have been a scandal, could have stayed a cautionary tale, but instead, it became a second chance. Because one intern refused to be silenced, because one man chose truth over pride, and because one child was never the mistake. He was the mirror that showed them who they really were. If this story moved you, comment below what moment hit you the hardest and answer the quiz at the end. Get it right within 7 days for a chance at our shoutout post. Watching late? Answer anyway. We might still surprise you. And if you love this kind of emotional story, the next one is already waiting for you. Click the video that will show on your screen soon. We'll meet you there. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss what happens next. Quiz. How many times was Richard Langford's name mentioned?